Hi, I'm Johnny Moran.
And I'm Tara Nelson.
And this is What We're Watching. Tara got to preview something really exciting this week, and that is Women, War, and Peace.
This program is so awesome. It's the story of Naila Ayesh, and she is a wife, a mother, and an activist. And she was raised in Israeli military-occupied territory after the Israeli-Arab War. And that really shaped her. I mean, this is a time where she and her friends and family were treated as second-class citizens, really worse than second-class citizens. I mean, there were homes were just being demolished. People were being pulled out of their homes and arrested in the middle of the night. And there were checkpoints and curfews. And basically, that really shaped her to become the activist that she was in adulthood. She married a fellow activist, and throughout their lifetime, they had to deal with being separated, being arrested, and ultimately they had a young child that they were raising together from separate places. So there's the story of Naila, and she's incredible, and of all of her friends, and then there's also the story of what was going on in a larger picture within the Israeli military-occupied territory that she lived in. At the time, what's really interesting is men were really being targeted by this Israeli government, and that's just based on how society was at the time. So men were being arrested and taken out of the picture, and women were saying, well, logically, we're 50% of this society. We're going to, there's voids in these activist organizations, and we're going to step in and fill those voids. And they did. When this government came in, they took out schools and universities and anything that could aid in an uprising. So what these women did is they formed these women's organizations, these groups that on the surface, they looked like they were support groups or serving the purpose of social work, really teaching women how to fend for themselves and live now that their husbands were being arrested and deported. But underneath, what they were doing is the secret uprising. And it's incredible to see the approach that they took. They knew they had to approach it from different fronts. They couldn't just work internally with their own group. They couldn't just work trying to get the world's attention. They had to go through all of these different outlets. And some of the amazing things that they did, probably my favorite part of the program is when they talk about what these women's groups did. And they're very open and literal, sharing this is exactly how we did it. They had teachers, who were no longer teaching because they were in schools, form their own classrooms so they could start to educate their youth. They led a boycott of Israeli goods so that you would see shop owners closing their shops early, and they had these secret documents that they would pass to each other that gave instructions basically on how to carry out this secret uprising. And then they started creating their own businesses. So you have these female entrepreneurs filling a need for alternate goods.
It's so interesting when you look back at the past decade or so, and you've got the Arab Spring, and you've got all these movements that seem to be rooted in social media. Like, that's how they got the message out. And you digest these stories, every day as they come along, and then you realize, this has only been around for a few years. Like, it's so interesting to see how they were able to get the word out and organize in these groups before the internet was around.
Right, it's incredible. And both times that Naila was imprisoned, she had the first time her husband went to a journalist and got a story going about how she was pregnant and actually miscarried in prison. And so that's actually how he got her out that first time. The second time, her husband was already arrested and deported. So it was her colleagues, it was her friends, her fellow women who were part of these organizations who took to the media and set out to have a campaign going to get her out, to reunite her and her infant child. And the Israeli government response to that was, okay, we'll reunite you, and actually put the baby in the prison with her. It's fascinating to see the role that media played even then, and just to think, we have social media now, what a massive difference it was.
And then there are some shows coming up that you didn't get a chance to preview, but you're looking forward to, right? And one of them is Mrs. Wilson on Masterpiece.
Yeah, I'm really excited to watch this. It's a 3-part series. So Ruth Wilson is the main actress, and it is based on the real story of her grandmother. So Ruth Wilson, in her family, her uncles, I think it was, got this memoir written by her grandmother, real life. And in the memoir, it basically detailed how Mrs. Wilson, so Ruth Wilson's grandmother, her husband, when he passed away, she discovered he had all of these secrets and she really didn't know him at all. So the 3-part series really plays out like a detective drama, with Mrs. Wilson being the detective trying to, follow clues and figure out who her husband really was.
And then Nature coming up this week looks really cute.
Yeah, it is really cute.
The Cheetah children.
Yeah, so I watched the preview and I love the baby cheetahs because they have these like really fuzzy, furry, like out of control, like hair on their backs, and they make these little sounds that actually sound more like a baby bird to me. These like chirping noises, and so they're so cute. But this is also another story about really tough mamas. It's like a tough mama week. Because so cheetahs only apparently meet to mate. So, the cheetah males don't stick around to help raise these cubs or anything. So the cheetah females live a life of solitude. They're basically totally alone, and then until they have babies, and then they have to be protector and provider. There's a lot of harsh reality in this program too. Just to see how they survive and whether or not they survive. And it's tough to watch, but it's incredibly educational and really interesting to see how this species lives and survives and how their families function.
One thing Nature just seems to do well consistently is they bring you in with the cute and then they turn it into a tearjerker.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.